Say your name.
Hi, I'm Nancy Bonacera.
I'm Carl Foss.
Sayed Ghani.
Nick Priest.
PJ Addison Reed. So let's go ahead and get started. The first item on our agenda is to talk about the select board presentation on 28th of February. And so everybody can chime in. Any thoughts that you have?
It was an uneventful meeting.
Was?
You can all laugh if you want to. It was a joke, folks.
Coming out of the gate strong, Saeed. Well done.
Straight face joke.
Oh my gosh.
Okay.
BJ, I thought that you conducted yourself with grace and maturity, and I was impressed by the way you kept your composure.
Thank you.
I echo that completely. I would not have been as composed as you were if I were sitting in that room. And part of me was very upset that I wasn't there, and part of me was happy that I wasn't there. So yes, what happened there was nothing short of a shock. I wasn't surprised. I would not have been surprised if there had been pushback. Having lived and still living in the compliance and auditing world with the past 20, 25 years, I've seen pushback firsthand as recommendations are made. So at the back of my mind, I was expecting some pushback, but the ignorance with which the select board came back was just mind-boggling.
So, real quick, if there's anybody who's not on mute that could go on mute, there seems to be some reverb happening on my end. I want to make sure that everyone's thoughts are captured clearly without that reverb happening. I want to personally apologize to all of you. This committee's been doing a lot of hard work, having very, BG and I had a conversation last week, and I kept saying, well, the issue of DEI, or the topic of DEI, and I wound up stopping myself, because it's not a topic or an issue. It's a much more holistic conversation that is woven into all of our lives, right? Every facet, right down to how we are as individuals and how we've each been raised. And I think that this committee is doing a good job of trying to turn that into measurable thought, which is a really, really hard task. And I was not on my game to support this committee the way that I should have at our last meeting. I obviously pushed to have this committee created. I believe that this committee's purpose is still valid. I believe that other members of the select board believe that as well. I think that, it's our job as a committee to continue trying to, find what we need to move forward. So I wanted to, I know I emailed all of you, but I wanted to say it to each of you. And in today's day and age, it's harder to do in person, but I wanted to at least take this opportunity to do so.
Thoughts?
Nancy, do you want to go first, or
I have just a few things to say.
go for it?
Nick, thank you for your apology. I feel for you because you were in the difficult position of being a member of the select board, but also being a member of the committee. So I understand that you wish you could have said more in the moment, but at the same time, you were also getting attacked. So I just want to acknowledge that. And then I've been telling people, because, a lot of people have been upset with the select board. I've also been saying, well, Nick acknowledges, yeah, maybe there could have been more done, but you have to remember he also fought really hard for the select board, and I wanted them to appreciate that and that you have been working with us. So I just wanted to let you know that. And for myself, I want to echo what Carl and Saeed said, and I also told BJ already, that I really admire how stoic she was and just how calm, um, and how she was able to respond to them and just say, well, if you don't want to listen to me, like, why did you even want this committee, or why are we here giving you this report? Like, what's the purpose here? And she turned it around to them rather than, acknowledging any of their attacks, because let's just face it, it was personal attacks where, maybe they didn't read the report, or they didn't want to listen, or they didn't understand. I mean, they literally said, why do we need this? Because they said, oh, what's wrong with the town as it is? So, if they can't even be on that starting point, it just, what the meeting showed was that we do need DEI in this town, and kind of confirmed that, and we have a long way to go. But I also want to address the good stuff that happened from the meeting, and as members of the committee, we've gotten so many messages, we've seen a lot of letters, emails, and it's really heartening to see that support, that there are people that understand that we need DEI, why we need it, and they're really behind BJ and the rest of us, and they want to see this happen. And I also want to thank again, Joanne Frostacci, Pat O'Brien, Sherry Ellis, Martha Duffield, and Ray Porch for speaking up at the meeting during citizens' time in defense of BJ and the committee. And I think that's just at least one, a couple positives. One, they showed their hand that, we really need this. And two, there are people out there that do get it, and we do have interest and support to move forward with our DEI work. And I think that's just what I want to add for now. I'll let Saeed go ahead. I'm sure I have other thoughts to add later, but thank you.
I already shared some initial thoughts. I guess what I'll wait for BJ to share her thoughts as well, and then I would love to know if anybody has heard back from the select board at all, if there's been any feedback from all of the feedback that they've gotten. Because at the end of the day, don't get me wrong, I'm not trying to sound pessimist here, as a pessimist here, but at the end of the day, our goal is to help implement or guide the select board towards making meaningful changes, right? That's our goal. And yes, I am very appreciative of all the positive feedback and all the support that we are getting. What I'm hoping for is that the select board, that some of that feedback, if not all of that, has resonated with the select board. And if not, then we need to figure out what else needs to be done to help them get to where we as a committee already are, right? And where a sizable population, I would assume, of Burlington is already there, right? So we need to help get the select board reach that point.
Nick?
I'm just gonna to kind of help. I mean, I don't have an answer for that, Saeed, but what I can say is that myself, Chairman Tigas, and Town Administrator Sagrin have been discussing, what we can be doing. If that means having this entire committee as to have a joint session with the select board, or to, we're trying to break down everything and see what we can do moving forward. Like you said, to kind of get everyone on square one, page one together. It's it's something that we think needs to happen. So don't be surprised if and I know I'm kind of out of pocket here, but as I kind of get back into the swing of things, if I don't reach out to BJ directly, or kind of maybe either aim to discuss it at our next meeting, what we think we want to kind of do with the select board, or if the select board has any thoughts that they can bring back to this committee. So that's kind of, I mean, it's a little up in the air right now. I apologize, I don't have more, but we are looking to take action.
Carl? Anything you wanted to add?
I mentioned in previous emails to everybody, but I did have a conversation with Jim Tigas, and he despite his inaction this 2 Mondays ago, is a support of what our mission is. And we all know that Nick is in support. And we know that Mike Espejo is going to be on the select board soon, and he is in support of what we are doing. So yeah, after the meeting last Monday, I was worried about what I mean, we all know that there's so much support around town, but in the places that have the power right now, I was worried, as I think we all were. After the conversation with Jim and some of the discussions that we had over email, I'm not as worried. I think that there is still a lot of work to do, and exactly how to go about that work is going to take some careful planning and discussions. And I love that, Nick, you're working with Jim and Paul to figure out how we can move forward and what the best path forward is going to be. And I still hate that BJ had to go through what he had to go through, and I'm still kicking myself in the butt that I didn't speak up in the moment, but it is what it is. I'm confident that there is a path forward for us. It's just figuring out what it is going to be the trick.
Well, I'd like to thank each of you for talking to each other so that we have a common understanding of what happened. As you know, I received lots of emails starting on Tuesday morning, and I tried to respond to some, and of course I used the old pattern of just choosing an email and write back, and then choosing an email and write back, until you had 3 or 4 emails from one person. I figured out, since I'm on AOL, in that upper left corner where it says compose, next to that there's a box, and if I put in the name, every email that came from them is listed one after another. So I don't have to look at it date by date by date by date. And that way I could put 3 emails came in the order that they were received into one email, respond one time, and that was appropriate to address it. But I felt driven Tuesday afternoon, and then of course around 6:30, that's when I decided that was enough attention. And then when I woke up Wednesday morning, I had decided at that point that I would write the letter, which you all have read, that I sent to the select board. It's out of my habit, but I didn't go to the gym that morning. It was just stay there and write it and get it clear in how I wanted to respond, and I did that. I've not heard from the select board at this point. And what I presented as the final statement in the letter was that I expected an apology from the select board, and that I would like to be appointed as a select board member, and that it was non-negotiable. Now, I understand that's not how it's normally done, and right now I don't understand whether they will consider that or not. But I did think that I would share with you, Nick, that there is another alternative, and that alternative is that as an executive coach, the select board can hire me as a consultant to provide them with the leadership that the select board needs to consider diversity, equity, and inclusion. And if they want to apologize and give me a contract that I can serve as the executive director, along with that, I want to be paid a fee for that service, written in a check form, and the fee is $1 for as long as I need to do diversity, equity, and inclusion for the town of Burlington. And I would like to remain as chair of the Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Committee. So that's what I'm presenting, and I'll send it to you in an email, Nick, so that you can talk with the select board. But I want to be able to not only guide what we're doing on this committee, because we've only done step one, which is to look at the data and tell us where we are now. And then the next step, step two, is to meet with the execs that run each of the departments. I now have a chart. There are no names, but I have titles. So with this chart, we can figure out what's our pattern, who are we going to meet, and what are we going to say to them. The other opportunity that we have is to look at the diversity scorecard. And we need to gather more data and decide what is it we want to measure in this town. What we have doesn't get us there. So as a committee, we can take leadership. I'm suggesting that as a consultant, I will work with the group that are the select board, and that can be an off meeting where we talk about what's the process, what's the definition of diversity, equity, and inclusion. What steps do we need to implement now to look at the philosophy, and what's the mission statement, and is there a change that's needed now? Because we need to lay that foundation before we begin to bring in execs and look at what they need to do for their individual departments. So it's not that we're back and we don't know where to go. We're at step two. And we're going to keep moving until we generate what we need to address this issue for this community. Any other thoughts?
Well, I just want to say, BJ, thank you for the alternative, proposal. I know that we're pulling up the exact language, but the initial request was just from a state law perspective illegal. So this is obviously a much more something that we can definitely turn our attention to and focus on as something to discuss with you over. And then I see no reason why you couldn't remain chair, but again, I'll talk with Jim and Paul about that just to confirm.
Well, just to confirm it again, it's the connection to what this is committee doing, but it's also to provide guidance for the select board, because they're not there and they need to be up where we are so that we can make this a reality.
Right. No, I get the distinction. I just wanted to,
Great.
yeah.
Any other thoughts about the meeting with the select board?
I was only going to say your proposal sounds like the bargain of the century for the town.
I'm here for service. And I've done diversity work for 45 years. I started at Harvard back in the 60s. So I know what it's like. And we're not at the point where we want to make people cry because they've not done the right thing. We need them to understand what their values are, and that controls their behavior. And if they're indifferent to a person of color, the question is why? Do they think that we're not intelligent? We're just like you are. And we're as smart as you are, and we can do what needs to be done. So don't try and blow us away because our skin color is different.
I just want to chime in. BJ, thank you. I think that again, that is a great offer, like Carl said, and yeah, you're offering so much experience and knowledge to the town, and it's on a volunteer basis, and they need to realize this is something they need to, accept this opportunity and learn from you and from the rest of the committee. You mentioned you don't want to make people cry, and I told you this, when we chatted. I was crying. I couldn't speak, and we've all kind of said we wish we could have said more, um, and that we felt bad. BJ was there in the moment by herself, and I think, this work is really hard, and I guess I just want to put a personal spin on it that, it is personal. Like, we hear people say, why do we need DEI? Why is it always about race? Like, I don't get it. What's wrong with this town? Well, for some of us, it's our day to day, 24/7. It's about race, right? We can't change what we look like. So I just wanted to put that spin on it too, because I know you can't literally step into someone's shoes, so that's what makes empathy difficult. But I think if you're willing to listen, then you can start to learn and begin to empathize. So I just wanted to add that. And again, I really appreciate everything BJ's doing, and I've learned so much from her, and the town can learn so much from her too, and I hope they take this opportunity. Thanks.
Thank you. I will share with you, out of all of the emails that I've had, there are probably 60 or more people that have written to me. So it's just trying to keep pace and try and respond and make sure that they understand. And I've sent as often as I can my ethnic mosaic chart, the presentation, and the 14-page report, so that they know what we were talking about, and they can not only watch the film but be able to substantiate what we were presenting. I have had several people suggest that I come and speak with their group. And so I want to ask if any of you are interested in attending an opportunity to hear what questions we might be asked at another group meeting. So that's a yes or no on your part. And you may
Sounds like
not want to, you may want to think about it, it's okay, but let me know. But if we hear from the school committee or someone from the high school that wants us to come and speak with students, or other organizations that want to understand what we're all about, those are coming. And we have to consider and make some decisions how we'll communicate and stay abreast of what they're trying to bring attention to.
Yeah, I would say BJ, if you could, let's keep everyone here abreast of anything, and then depending on schedules, whoever can attend and wants to attend, that way it's a little bit more available to everybody.
Great. Well, I will try and do that to make sure that you're all kept in line with where we have an opportunity to do that. Any other comments?
I want to
Yeah.
chime in about the letters, because most of them were directly towards the select board. I was chatting with a few people, and Amy actually confirmed that maybe these letters could be entered into the record or read out loud at citizens' time. Nick, have you had that done before, or do you think that would work and might be useful just to have these things on record?
It's a great question. I'll ask Paul and see if we can just have them placed in the record.
Thanks.
That might be a good approach. I would share with you that I had an offer that I speak with a reporter from a Burlington paper, and I declined that offer. The communication right now is between us and the select board, and we need to confirm where we are and the next steps we're going to take, rather than bringing in conversations from two people who are not talking, but to a news who is interpreting what we're saying and drawing us together. Maybe, maybe not. So I do want to communicate directly with the board and determine where we're going to go and how we're going to get there.
if I can add my 2 cents here, I think that's a sane approach. That's a wise approach, BJ. But I would keep that in your back pocket, in our collective back pocket, because at the end of the day, we are, and the way I see it is, we would be doing the town a disservice and the townspeople a disservice if we do not let them know what happened. In this day and age, in the year 2022, to actually listen in and observe that conversation live was not something I was expecting.
Sure. I understand. Other thoughts? Next steps for our committee. So there are two things, and then just to briefly state what our next agenda is going to look like. I've already stated this. We need to look at defining who is on the organizational chart and beginning to track meetings with them. And we need to refine what the diversity scorecard looks like. So that will be on our next agenda. At this point, I'd like to open up the floor as an open meeting so that anybody who has joined in our conversation has the opportunity to speak. So we open the floor. Nick, we have Elaine and Jeff and Edward Parsons that are listed here.
Yep, I
Those
know
are the
Ed
names
had
I
his,
see. I don't know who else might be here. You may know.
yeah, no, that seems to be everybody at least on the WebEx chat. I know Ed, you had your hand up.
I did, thank you. I wanted to quickly apologize for just jumping in, snooping, and having to leave in a few minutes because I'm triple booked tonight. But I just wanted to mention that I'm also sorry that I haven't listened in to date with my finite bandwidth. But after the fact, I watched the select board, and I'm a little chagrined to say that I wasn't surprised by the reception, particularly as much as it was very inappropriate, and I think it reflected a lack of understanding of the language. And what I will say is that I think that everything that you have proposed in the report was extremely well founded and very necessary for the town. Um, I'll say that there are a lot of people who, like me, very much support what was in it. And if I can, maybe I can talk to Nick later. I would volunteer any help in kind of translating, because I do think that members of the select board aren't at the point of understanding the language of what's being asked. And so just that, I pledge my support for what you're doing, and I hope you can make a go of this and really make this work. Please don't be discouraged.
Thank you.
Thanks,
Welcome.
Ed.
Thumbs up.
I know that there were other folks that said that they were not going to be able to attend tonight, but did want to voice their
We have
support.
Elaine and Jeff.
Yeah, hi, this is Jeff Duffield. I'm just sitting in to observe and listen in. I did listen to the BCAT recording of the select board meeting, and like y'all was kind of horrified by all the treatment, particularly of you, BJ. And nothing struck me more when I compared, in the video, to how they treated other guests with more esteem and respect and curiosity. And then when it got to you, BJ, it was just horrifying to see the difference of treatment. Instead of asking questions and being curious about it, they met you with defensiveness and reasons for why things shouldn't get done. So yeah, that's kind of my 2 cents. But here to listen in and help out however I can.
Thank you. I would share with you that I have just read a book. It's called Leadership on the Line. And there are two presenters that are business school at Harvard. Heifetz and Linsky wrote the book, and it's the experience they've had with leaders and the role that we have in a leadership position. And sometimes you bring people into the conversation, but when it gets to be a tough conversation, it's like you're on a balcony and you're observing rather than getting engaged. And one of the books that it focuses on is that when you're talking about a topic that the body does not want to address, rather than talk the issue and the strategy that you're putting forward, the response is to attack the leader. And that's what happened to me last Monday. I didn't want to talk about diversity or inclusion or equity or any of those aspects. They didn't want to do the report. And so rather than address what was before them, they discriminated against me. And I understand that. And that's part of the reason why I was stoic and listened to what was happening, but to understand it was coming from their perspective, which was a narrow vision of what needs to be done. And so that's where we let it be, and that's not where it's going to stay, because we're all engaged and will continue to move forward with addressing the issues. Thanks, Jeff. Elaine?
I'm just listening in right now. Like, this is the first time I've been listening to the group themselves, and I appreciate all of you and what you've been doing. I wish this had taken place many years ago, that we had this group, but I'm glad you're all here now. So thank you.
Thank you, Elaine. Is there anyone else that would like to contribute to the conversation?
Can I jump in here?
Sure.
So we've talked about what we want to do for our next steps, and I guess we're kind of waiting on what the select board response might be to what you're requesting, BJ, and offering. They do have a meeting coming up, right? Like next week? Any of this gonna come up, or should we go to public participation, or what do you think the approach is, and how, I guess I'm trying to envision the timeline or the scheduling, like when can we meet with them, or when can we start addressing these things?
Yeah.
Our next meeting is 2 weeks from today. It's the 23rd.
Yep. So the next select board meeting is Monday. And I do know that a massive chunk of the meeting is unfortunately being spent on the MBTA with the new state regulations around housing as in relation to stops. We have town council coming in to give a lengthy report slash dissertation that we all get to partake in. So typically we finalize the agenda, I believe on Thursday, tomorrow. So once I know kind of where we are timing wise, I can let this committee know. I'm like 90% sure that some issuance of an apology is coming on the 14th, at the very least. And then in terms of discussing next steps, I believe Jim and Paul are kind of waiting for me to get back. So I seem to be the hold up to some of this. So it won't be finalized for the 14th, but I'll do everything I can to have it finalized for the next meeting, which will be on the 28th.
Thank you.
Sorry, Nick, just to confirm, so you're saying that we may speak with the board again, or be there with the board again on the 28th? Is that what you're saying?
Well, I mean, by all means come, for citizens time if you guys want to, speak sooner. The catch with citizens time, and Paul tried to say this at our last meeting, is that typically citizens time is for citizens to just come and soapbox for a period of time, and the board typically doesn't respond in the moment. It's more of a let us go away and come back with an actual measured response. So if members of this committee want to speak to the board on the 14th, by all means. I'm going to see beyond my understanding of the apology, what else we can try to accomplish on the 14th. And then depending on that, we'll, see if we can't continue conversations, whether it's just, myself and BJ with, Jim and Paul, between now and our next meeting, or however it's going to kind of shake out. This is where public participation and meeting posting gets real wonky in terms of like making things happen. And that's the biggest hang up, unfortunately. But I will do everything I can to keep this ball moving.
Okay, thank you.
Any other topics? Okay, where are we on the minutes?
I sent a day or two ago, I sent the minutes from our previous meeting, which were February 17th. Are there any corrections that no one sent anything back, so I assume that they look okay? I will therefore move to approve the minutes from 2/17, and if they're approved, I'll send them to town hall.
There just was one,
Oh,
page 2, item 3, under the scorecard model. That first sentence. This is what a report looks like.
mm-hmm.
If they approve, this provides guidance on how we
Oh.
might want to POUT. Did you mean pull?
I meant put, P-U-T, not pout. Sorry about that.
Okay. So that was the thing that I circled.
Oh, that's okay. That's an easy fix.
Call for a vote. All those in favor?
I
Aye.
Thank you.
I vote. Good to go. Nick, I thought you had the 23rd for our next meeting.
I believe that is correct. Let me just confirm.
That's what we discussed at the last meeting. We put
Yes.
on tonight, the
Yep,
23rd,
the 23rd. Yep.
April 6th, and April 20th.
Yes. Got it circled in my notes, Carl.
Now you sent us the format for this meeting. Can I use that same format for the 23rd?
The WebEx?
Yes.
No, I'll provide. I've already made them, but I'll go in and send it to you
Okay.
before Friday. That way you have it.
I just like to do it well ahead of time so that we're in advance, and if we need to do any reading or catch up with each other, we can do that. Are there any other topics we need to discuss at this time?
I just want to acknowledge this message that Nick has posted in the chat for everybody, about working via email. And to petition the state to make it more functioning, I guess. So Nick, I'm sure, and this is probably my ignorance because of lack of involvement before this committee in local government. I'm going to guess this must not be the first time that this issue has come up, right? That other folks must have aired this concern. Um, any idea, any thoughts on why it's not been implemented, or what's what may be holding it up?
I think it's the concern at the state level is the how we define and regulate what is a public meeting and discussion, right? Like technically, right? Let's take the select board for example.
Mm-hmm.
If there's any more than 2 of us in a room at a time, we have a quorum, and
Sure.
therefore decisions can be swayed, right? So, open meeting law, the state says, don't even email each other anything that could pertain to a discussion topic because therefore you could be influencing other members of the committee, which can lead to inadvertent coercion and all of that
Mm-hmm.
craziness. But if everybody had a municipal email address and everything could be, and this is me talking, this isn't
Right.
but if all of us had public email addresses that could be that would be part of the public record, right? That could be requested through a
Mm-hmm.
town clerk's office, then there almost shouldn't be, in my opinion, as stringent of a I mean, like, you shouldn't have full-blown discussions, but like if we needed to have a working document, and this is to Nancy's point, right? This is why subcommittees would be great for us moving forward, because then 2 of us could be working on something moving forward
Sure.
without those kinds of things. So Yeah, I mean, from a state level perspective, I don't know. I will ask Ken Gordon, our state rep. I forget if it comes down to a governor thing versus a state body type thing. But OML is, in my opinion, overly stringent, and in today's day and age, where a couple emails wouldn't, break the bank in terms of getting work done.
Sure.
But yeah, I mean, we're definitely not this is not the first time someone's had this conversation for sure.
Right. Sure.
But it's a tough one to broach.
Yep. It ends up, I guess it's that difficult dance or balance between um privacy and openness, right? And not letting one group or one person or a group of or a number of people just hog the mic, for lack of a better phrase, I guess. Thanks
Yeah.
for explaining that.
Oh yeah, no, for sure. It's they obviously in a time before all of the technology, right? It was a lot easier because you have to get into a room to
Right.
have the conversation to make the decisions and discussions. And now they're trying to mitigate that by saying keep doing that. Don't work offline essentially. Again, which is where subcommittees come into a big play. But yeah, I mean, I haven't really found a good loophole. Town council does not want to even, wink, wink, nudge, nudge, suggest a loophole. Because if we get caught, that's when the state can kind of go after you, and there's fines and everything else. So
One of the things that I would like to suggest is that for our next meeting on the 23rd of March, that we invite Joanne Faust again for three reasons. One is we have the chart, we have the title of the person, and I have a list of names. If we could match and figure out who's the person we need to connect with, she would be able to help us identify that. That's one.
Mm-hmm.
Two, she's responsible for policies and procedures. And we've looked at that so we could begin to focus, saying that these are some issues that need to be addressed. She may want to draft, she may ask us to provide her with how we would draft. That's the opportunity to say that. And the third issue that we could address with her is that all of the union contracts are being negotiated. And that's happening this spring because the contract goes out June 30th, 2022. And if three of them have no language about discrimination and none of them address diversity, equity, and inclusion by definition, and there's no policy, we could talk with Joanne about that as well. So what's your thought?
a couple quick things. The org chart, BJ, if you want to send that just via email to me and Joanne, we could probably fill that out without having to call her in for that specifically. That's something that we can actually email about.
I can send you the chart because I just got it this week, and I'll
Yeah.
send it to everybody so that we have it.
Yeah, please disseminate, because I would like I told you last week. I'm like, as soon as some people were like, "Oh yeah, no, we have an org chart," I'm like, I've been asking for an org chart for a month, so I don't know why.
It has, it just says a number page 20 on it, but again, it's just the boxes with the titles and no names, no phone numbers.
I think it may have been originally created by the accounting department for the budget, if I recall, but I could be wrong. Question: do we want to, as a group, create proposed language to then suggest to Joanne, because even though she's already HR, that would still have to go through the select board for implementation. So do we, if in our advisory capacity, do we want to draft language that could be put into union contracts, or wherever we think it needs to go before we So I mean, I guess what's the end game for having Joanne in the meeting?
My hunch is that we need to be engaged with her first because she has responsibility for agreeing with the draft language or making changes to the draft language. And then that's what we put forward. If it has to go to the select board, then they can look at it. But I think it's collectively working with her, as is every executive, for what they want to do with their organization. So we're providing them a framework for doing that, and then they're engaged and will want to move forward to get the right approval for it, so it comes into play.
Okay, so then we should draft language ahead of having her or anybody else review it?
We can do that, yes. And I don't have difficulty with writing policies and procedures. I've done that my entire life.
Can I just jump in here about policies and procedures? Because we had like the town employee handbook. And a lot of us were talking about, the conduct of the other select board members. And in the town employee handbook and also the committee handbook, there's, stuff about just being respectful. Is wasn't sure exactly where the select board falls. Like, are you considered town employees or would you kind of follow like the committee thing? And is there like a separate code of conduct or policy for elected officials? Because that was something we were talking about as the Burlington Equity Coalition and also Burlington Against Racism, looking at a code of conduct just for elected officials if there isn't already one, or maybe it just needs to be reiterated and restated, in particular for the select board.
Well, you're
Yeah.
right in several ways. One is it's what does the select board want to have for their philosophy? And what do we expect in terms of values, which are honor, respect, truthfulness? There's a whole range of that. And in fact, part of working with them is to figure out what their values are, and it controls their behavior, which we've seen some of, and saying this is what we need to demonstrate as a model for the select board, which then carries on through the organization and it comes into policy and procedure. So all of this it needs to be looked at holistically rather than one without the other.
So Nancy, to answer your question, I know that a state selectman's handbook does exist. I'm pretty sure I have it on my other computer. And I don't know, I haven't read the whole thing, so I don't know if it addresses ethics and or, I guess, best practices in terms of, running a meeting, let's say. I would imagine that if it doesn't, that the committee handbook should cover us to some extent. We shouldn't be free of that. But I can double check on that as well.
Well, we also need to look at what's the policy and the procedure for hiring. We've talked about that. It's vacant because we only post internally. And if we don't have somebody inside, then maybe we'll look outside. And that bars anybody who is a person of color. And so those issues need to be addressed.
I'm sorry, BJ. No, we definitely don't just post internally only.
That's not what the policy says. It's not what Joanne said. We post internally first.
First, right. We had this conversation at one of our meetings. Is that
Then you have to look at the data, Nick.
The
We
wording
don't-
actually, go ahead.
Go ahead, Nancy.
Okay, yeah, I was just gonna say, it does actually say the position is posted internally, and I think it has a period of time, but it actually says if it's filled, then we don't need to go outside. If it isn't filled within this time frame, then we finally go outside. Or basically, if it's not filled, then we look outside. But first, and I don't know if that's for all, I mean, from discussions with people, like I guess entry level would be the one that would be open to everyone, but maybe some of those internal things. And I mean, I guess that's part of like, you know, union contracts and things too. So, but
It's
yeah,
how you
as far as how I read it, yeah, it does sound like, okay, we basically just want to give this stuff to people in here unless nobody wants it, and then we go outside, is how I read the language that's in there.
Sure. Okay.
That's not the way you do it. And so we call it into question and have to have a discussion about it. So should we invite Joanne? Yes or no?
Personally, I feel like we should do some of the legwork first and then have her in for review.
Okay. Everybody agree?
Question that I have in my mind is, would we be staying within our remit if we are proposing language for amendments or agreement updates? And that's an open question that I don't have an answer for right now.
There is no agreement that I'm aware of. And yes, we did suggest to the select board what our philosophy is and said they need to present their philosophy. We looked at their mission statement and drafted how the mission statement should change. We've had no discussion about that. So our response is to try and direct how to lead the conversation. It doesn't mean that it's finalized when you're presenting a structure or a way of looking at it.
Yeah, but I've got my question goes a step or two before that, BJ. My question is the remit of the committee, does the remit of the committee allow us to make those suggestions or edits, suggested edits to contracts? We can tell, we've already aired our concern, right? That X number of policies are 30, 35 years old, that so many official documents are missing any mention of DEI, right? So we've already made our recommendations there that language needs to be, updated. My point is, would we remain an independent committee, and would we remain within the remits of our existence, so to speak, as a committee, by making those suggestions? Or I guess, sorry, providing suggested language. That's my question.
Oh, I see what you're asking. I think as an advisory committee, that still falls under our purview. Like we could say we're advising, that this is the language that can be used, right? And then from there it travels up to the select board, which would look at it and go yay, nay, or edits, right? And then in terms of the union contracts, it would then have to go into the negotiation conversation, at which point the union reps and our representatives would have that as a piece of the conversation, which is taking it all the way to that track. But like for example, Saeed, the what is it, the diversity policy that hasn't been touched since 1987, right? Like this committee can absolutely take that and update it with our suggested language, write it up, and have Joanne look at it and get Joanne's thoughts, right? And then once we have her thoughts, then we as the advisory committee to the select board turn around to the select board and say, select board, here's what we're suggesting in terms of the update. Select board votes on that, and then it gets implemented, right? So it's kind of like we still want to involve the director because there's language there that and insights there they can provide. Then once that happens, it goes to the select board to then be put into implementation by the director. Does that help, or am I talking in circles?
No,
you're
it's
Thinking the same exact thing.
Thank you.
Sorry, go ahead, Said.
I was going to say that helps. Thank you very much. Go ahead, Carl.
That's where Nick said what I was thinking too, and you had used the word suggestion several times, and I think that's my understanding of our role is to have these discussions and provide the suggestions and our thoughts. And then it's up to the select board to take those thoughts and implement them or not. And, I mean, we're all hopeful that they will, but, at the end of the day, we are an advisory committee. We don't, the power that we do have is not to actually change the documents, it's to make those suggestions. Are we all thinking the same thing?
Yeah, this is, you know, kind of, and you know, I had hoped that it was coming through in past meetings, right? Like either if we don't actually provide anything for anyone to react to, if we just say, hey, that document needs to be updated, you know, then the onus doesn't fall to anybody, right? But if we as the advisory committee say, hey, that needs to be updated, we've identified that, and here's how we would update it as your advisory committee, then action can be taken, because now that action is reactionary to the advisement.
Just to review, the first step is to evaluate where we are now. We've done that. That's why we have our first quarterly report. We've looked at the documents, and it's measuring what has and hasn't happened in the past. Now we're looking at what's the next step? What changes do we need to suggest? And our role as a committee is to review that and present options. The third step is then for the leadership of the organization to put it into play and see what the result is. Was policy changed appropriately? Have we changed the process to getting people engaged in interviewing for the job, that they all meet expectations based on the role and responsibility? We're not taking someone who doesn't have the knowledge and skills because they meet that expectation, and then including them to be considered for an opportunity to work for the town. And then finally, at the end of a year, you look at measuring what we accomplished this year. Who was engaged? What went into play? What are the results? Who absolutely refused to talk to us because they don't want any part in this? And it's fallen worse than it was when we measured it this year. So that's what your diversity scorecard begins to analyze. So is that helpful?
It is, yes. Thank you very much.
Great.
Yeah, that makes sense to me. Just as an aside, I did paste in the chat the wording that we were reading, as it sounds like unless it's not filled internally, they don't bother posting outside. And to BJ's point, that kind of is a complete blockade of diversity if we only have 7% people of color in town employees population right now.
Right. No, I was reading that, Nancy. Thank you for posting it.
We also need to look exclusively, if it's just town employees, what the statistics look like and what do school employees look like. So that measurement, I don't know whether it's there and it's blended all in, or whether they're separate. And so again, that's the strategy of looking at where we are and how we need to refine it to move forward.
I'm thinking the school is separate, actually, but you made me think of the other thing I wanted to bring up. And I don't think we have this information because I believe I talked to the town clerk about it before. But some people have been talking about, like, oh, why doesn't anyone, people are complaining about, diversity, and the government isn't diverse enough, the elected officials aren't diverse enough, but nobody wants to run. So it'd be interesting to see what the actual demographics are right at the moment, and also use that to, encourage, you know, putting in DEI practices there too. But that might not be something we can get, because again, it's like, voluntary information, especially if they're like in a voluntary position, being an elected official. So as
Well,
far as
we're
I know,
here to provide leadership in the direction, and if you have Joanne who's providing leadership for the school department and for the town, they're two separate organizations. And we could have different kinds of statistics that we're looking at, but that's part of opening our eyes to see what's going to be the best advantage for moving forward, collectively or by individual organizations. And that's part of the decision-making that we want to engage the select board to participate in that process. Any other thoughts? It's been an excellent hour. Motion to adjourn
Motion to adjourn.
Second.
simultaneously. Thank you. Nick gave the motion and Carl said adjourned. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
5 and 0. Thank you, everybody.
Good night, everybody.
Thank you,
Good night, everyone.
BJ.
Bye-bye.
See you soon. Bye.
Bye.